Okay, here we are in the second video for week 1, Family Sociology, Chapter 1, but what we're going to look at here predominantly, in fact exclusively, will be theories. Now theories, if you're unfamiliar with theories in terms of a sociological perspective, it's not like, maybe the better way to look at this would be if you had 5 or 6 pairs of sunglasses and you stood outside and put one on, and you looked around, you'd see the world in a certain way. And then if you took them off and then put on a different colored pair and put them on and looked around, well, the world would look a little bit differently just because of the different lens there. And so every time you put on a new set of glasses would give you a different sort of perspective. Now you can look at theories kind of that way. Now what makes it a little different, of course, is they're not wearing sunglasses. They've done research and used the data, qualitative and quantitative, and have sort of made sense of that information in a way that over time and doing repeated studies have been able to look at society and make some sort of conclusions that they believe, based on the research that they've done, help explain certain aspects of sociology, or as in our case, more specifically, family sociology. And there are several groups that have gathered data looking at family, and it's just about like wearing different sort of glasses and looking at it saying, well, that's how they see family and how they see the relationship between family and society. Or in some cases, that would be the macro case, looking at the bigger issues. Or some will be micro, which will look at the relationship between family and how does that work? How do they solve problems? How do they celebrate traditions? How do they create the dynamic that is family and raise children in a family? So we'll look at the micro and the macro. I'm going to go through several of them. They're all in the textbook, so please feel free to go back and review. You may find that that's very helpful to do with this kind of content. So relax and get ready, because here we go. So thinking about families, there are many theories that explain what makes families work and how they relate to society as a whole. Now, a theory provides a general framework of ideas that can be used to answer questions about the social world. It can be used alone or in combination with others. Understanding theories is important because they help shape government policy, agency regulations, methods in therapy, and other ways society relates to family. Sociologists have used a number of approaches, either singly or in combination, to look at some order or meaning to questions about the social world. So when discussing theories, ask the following type questions. For example, how does the theory account for both change and continuity in family patterns? Now, family patterns would be the makeup of family. It could include, when did we shift from being a nuclear biological family, mom and dad and kids living together and parents staying together for life, to having as many variations of family patterns as we have now? So one of the things would be is, how does the theory take into account these changes in the continuity in family patterns? Secondly, does the theory show how society and family influence each other? Now you could argue, that society has influenced the shift of family patterns from being a traditional family into these different variations, but you could also argue quite easily that it's been individuals' pursuit of individual happiness that have delayed, for example, wanting to get married, getting married later, starting a family later, which has contributed to families having fewer children than what they had in the past. So it could be that individual families have influenced the population lack of growth or the need for more immigration. So and the third point would be, what does the theory say about relationships within the family? Now what we'll see in some of these theories is that not all of them think in terms of the small scale, what goes on in the family. Some will think strictly of the bigger scale, and others will look strictly at the small scale but ignore the bigger. And then fourthly, how has the theory affected the policies and practices of government, social agencies, and others who deal with families? And so we need to look at and consider, how does this data, how does this information, how does this theory translate into policy. Structural functionalist point of view is the first view we're going to look at, and this is often considered a particularly traditional view of family. At its sort of core, if you look at what you see in the graphic there, is structure. So there's, society is made up of different structures. Family is one of those structures. And it's the relationship between all of these structures. Now, I've only shown you 4 in the graphic there, but there are many more. Religion, media, sports teams, work, can all be considered different institutions. And it's the relationship between these structures of institutions that's of interest to structural functionalists. Now, the function part is what role or what function does each of the structures perform? Now, and our focus is on family. So from a structural functionalist view, the function of family is to socialize children. At least that's one of the primary ones. If you consider their functions, you can look at a reproductive function, that one of the functions of family is to produce children. Now, we do know that you don't need to be in a family to produce children, but from a structural functionalist view, they look at family in a more traditional way. Have a family, have children is the direction of preference. So reproductive function, a place for physical protection. Children in families should be protected physically and emotionally, but we also know that doesn't always happen. One of the other functions is economic function and emotional security. And then fourthly, parent children to be law-abiding, contributing members of society. That's part of socialization. And so when we look at the function and we add, okay, well, their function is to socialize their children, to bring them up. It's a lifelong process in which cultural knowledge, how to get along in the world that you live in, cultural knowledge, and how to survive and participate in the social life is passed on generationally. It explains how the family is related to other institutions and how it contributes to society as a whole. So when we raise our children, we help them, grow up in the family and be participants in the family, and then we help them with how to get along at school, how to get along in the workforce, how to get along in these other social environments, and give them skills so when they're more on their own, they can continue to live a life that's helpful, useful, happiness for themselves, and contributing to society. Now, part of what the functionalists will talk about are called social scripts. And social scripts are these rules that outline what, where, when, how, and why should we do something. Now, functionalists believe that the role specialization increases efficiency of family function. And what they mean by role specialization is everyone gets a certain amount of responsibility in the family. When you're a 3-year-old, you don't have as much responsibility as a 16-year-old. And what role a 16-year-old has is more specialized. And so that specialization, and that includes the specialization between mom and dad. Now, in a more traditional family model, dad is the breadwinner, mom is the child rearer. And that's the specialization that the functionalists talk about. Now, the point that I made in the graphic there on social stability is if all structures function as they're supposed to, then that creates a social stability within society. And that's what they're all about, is keep it the same, keep it stable. Not a lot of fast movements. Now, the strength of their theory is that it emphasizes family relationship to other institutions and contributes to the whole. But their weakness is that it's not as clear in explaining why families in society change. They just know that they do. It often ignores topics such as family violence and sexual abuse, sees delinquency and crime as a social rather than a family problem. It's not very tolerant of differences from the standard North American family. They think that that's the way that the best functions as society, but we know that that's not what's predominantly occurring within families. And it tends to assume that society has one set of norms and values, but those change over time too, and they may vary because of the vastness of cultural diversity in Canada. Okay, so let's move on to another theory. We'll move into conflict theory, and the conflict is also, like functionalism, a macro theory. And like structural functionalists, they view the society from a bigger view. They view the family from the perspective of society, so not the individual players. According to Marxist theory, which is a predominant theory in conflict theory, the economic system of society has a profound influence on all social groups, including the family. And what you're seeing is a group that's called the haves, and they have a lot of the influence, the power, the resources, money, holdings, and they also have influence on the have-nots. And those would be people who work for a living, who work for people who are the haves. And so when they look at family, they're saying it's these influencers of the haves, the bourgeois, who influence the proletariat and the families. So social policies are influenced by people who have versus people who have not. Some theorists stress the negative influences and are concerned with the power relationship and inequity. So part of the theory is because there's a limited amount of resources and because of that scarce resource, there's a competition for that resource. And the haves keep what they have, and the influence they have is to have everyone else to compete for the resources that are left. Conflict theorists are not strong in demonstrating how families contribute to society as a whole, but neither are they good at explaining why society's norms and values for family tend to change slowly. Conflict theory in family has largely been a larger sociological theory. It struggles with its place in family sociology. Now, this is our first micro theory, symbolic interactionalists, and accordingly, individuals develop a sense of self, status, and role through the attitudes and relationships of others. And they develop a sense of roles that they are expected to fill within their family. How we are raised and the responsibilities that we are given tells us a little bit about who we are, that's our sense of self, our status in terms of where in our family pecking order are we, and where in regards to what we do that is respected by our family, that's status. The roles would be the things that we are expected to do within our family. You know, when you do chores, that's part of your role. And you learn about the role of helping out the larger unit, the family. Putting yourself in another's place is called role-taking. So when you watch children play house and they put themselves in the positions of the mom and the dad, they're not creating a new position and imagining what it would be like to be, separate from their parents. They are role-taking. They are taking on the role of their parents and playing it. Role strain, on the other hand, is the sense of discomfort felt when one has difficulty meeting the role expectations. And you'll see this in families a lot. When times get tough, people start having to do many, many things. And when they're doing many things, they don't do all those things well. And that's called role strain. Now, range of ways families express love they're interested in. Not everyone expresses love in the same way. They don't communicate and problem solve in the same way. They don't socialize or participate in community and society in the same way. Roles of the husband and wife are not not common. They're unique and separate. And how they may adjust due to illness, loss of a job, promotion, new child, all can affect family. And social interactionalists are looking at how. What is the influence of these life-changing events, and how do families cope and alter and change with these other influences entering their lives? The value of symbolic interactionalism is emphasis placed on the person's responsibility in shaping their view of the world. And so it looks at the individuals much more carefully and more closely. As a result, it's been the basis for a lot of therapies like family therapy. Its major weakness is that it ignores factors such as laws, economics, social class, values, and it doesn't explain society-wide changes in family. Interpreting meaning is part of what they do strongly, is words and actions of family members. What do they mean and how are they understood within the family? Not everyone celebrates Christmas the same way, or Thanksgiving or Easter, and it's this sort of how do families come to understand this as their tradition? How do they get handed down, and how do we celebrate them and reinforce it? They concentrate on the interaction between individuals rather than the bigger social system, and they're interested in the meaning people associate with different symbols, words, actions, and events. So they look at the very small details of family. Now, family as a system, this is another sort of combination. It's a little bit of both of macro and micro. A system contains a set of interrelated and interacting parts. It's kind of like functionalism, but it's a more modern version of it, and it takes bigger and smaller issues at hand here. Anything that affects one part of the family will affect its parts. So a change in a family, parents' relationship, they get a divorce, is going to affect everybody in the family, including extended families and friends. Anything, strength of family systems theory is its ability to account for impact of one individual's behavior on all other members. So that's the micro component of it. So for example, if a parent is stressed or angry, and they likely have an impact on all family members. Or if a person is in the role of parent and another must be corresponding role of child. So it looks at these roles and the relationship between parent and parent, child and child, as a system. All is interrelated and connected. It recognizes the complementary roles that families also have subsystems or smaller grouping members within families. And so you could have the subsystem of children, the relationship between children and how they form their relationship and how the nuances of children relating to children. How is it that boys tend to be more friends than with girls? Or is that changing now in today's society? So systems and subsystems, they have barriers. No girls allowed, that's a barrier, which marks who is a member and who is not. The most common subsystems are spouse, parent, and siblings. Now, the strength of the family system theory is its ability to account for impact of one individual on all others. It explains why destructive behaviors can occur across generations, and as a result, many therapists use it as a base of their family work. The weakness is the concentration on family system as a whole overlooks the experiences of individuals, especially women in the case of wife assault. Assumes destructive behavior is a vicious cycle. Little to no reference to important social factors, although the theory is quite capable of including such influences. Now, the next theory is what's called fair trade within a family, or the fair trade theory. And in this case, it's also known as exchange theory, and it states that the family life can be viewed in terms of cost, benefit, and risk. Explains decision-making in families, especially in the husband-wife relationship. In spousal relationships, power is not usually shared equally. And so there's a bargaining that goes on. For instance, they have studied marital interaction as a bargaining process used by one member who wishes to change the family rules. Power in families is not shared equally by spouses, and in many families, the husband has the advantage in education, income, prestige, social status, even size. As a result, he has more resources for which to bargain with. Now, that's not necessarily holding true in all cases in all families, but in regards to the data, it happens more often than we may like to accept. So one of the weaknesses of this theory is that it focuses on the individuals rather than the overall family needs. Assumes that people behave in sort of a self-interest way without the bigger picture of family at heart. And that may not be true either. Now we'll move into feminist theory. And the feminist theory, in terms of their study of the family, sort of borrows from and piggybacks on conflict theory. And so I've used the same model of a teeter-totter, if you will. Feminist approach has a great impact and is a driving force for much current research on the family. It has a macro view, a big picture view, that gender is a necessary category to understand and explain the inequities in homes, paid labor, politics, law, and culture. And at the root of this is what's called patriarchal view, or the patriarchal system, in which the family, which they see family, They view the family as what they see as the problem is patriarchy. Patriarchy is basically male-dominated or male-led. Now, matriarchy would be female-led. What they would be more geared towards is egalitarianism, or E for equal, not P for papa or M for mama. They would see more egalitarian as more of a balance to that scale there. Now, gender socialization is a process by which individuals learn the socially defined behavior appropriate for what it is to be male and what it is to be female. Gender is not biology. Biology is function, how your body works sexually. Gender is the socially prescribed behaviors that you're supposed to behave as in a particular culture. So boys are expected to be active and aggressive, girls expected to be nurturing and sensitive to others. Now again, we see some of this changing and more permission being granted, if you will, for each to be a little more of who they are. Still, widespread acceptance of the idea that women can be fulfilled by a wife or as women can be fulfilled only as a wife or a mother. Now this is what's called the myth of motherhood. And the belief, and some people still believe this, that the most value that a woman can have and can be feeling for herself is to be a wife and a mother. Now this is one of the myths that the feminists point out is, of course women can feel much more than just that as their what they need to get out of life. And so when feminists view this family dynamic, they look at, well, where else do we get socialized into seeing that things aren't the same? For example, in homes, men tend to have more power and control than women and receive more of the benefits. Housework that women do is often called the second shift. If they're working and they come home and do housework, that's what they call the second shift. In paid labor, men are paid more for equal work. Women have been discouraged from working in more traditional roles like working in non-traditional roles like military, construction, science, and technology. Now we see some of that shifting too. In politics, not properly represented in politics given their numbers, and we see, at least federally with this last election, the Liberals trying to push more of that diverse look of cabinet. In law, we see that the feminists have made an initial headway when women won the right to be seen as a person. That was in 1929. Imagine that. You may still have family members, great-grandparents or grandparents even, who are alive, who remember that vote being done in 1929 that gave the women a right to be seen as a human being. It's amazing. Culture, part of Canadian culture. We saw a huge shift in Canadian culture for women during the hockey for the Olympic and the World Cup when women did so well. So women are starting to break some of the molds that have otherwise been barriers. Feminists also support equity in the workplace, equal pay, and promotional opportunities, but they're criticized for too much emphasis on the role that gender plays in social interaction. Okay, two more theories. We're going to look at this one here. This is the Ecological Theory. It looks at the relationship between family and society, and it sees families as part of an interlocking system that influences each other at 5 levels. There's the micro level. It consists of small groups in which people interact face to face. These are the people you meet with at school, at work, and in family. Directly affects the quality of life through relationships with individuals. Therefore, its nature and quality are important. Each family member has a different microsystem. For example, that of a young child includes whoever cares for them during the day, such as a babysitter or a daycare center, as well as their own immediate family. Then there's the mesosystem, which is made up of the relationships between 2 or more of these individuals, that they're a member of. For a child, the mesosystem might consist of the relationship between parents and the daycare. For a parent, their mesosystem might include the relationship between family and the workplace. The exosystem is a setting in which individuals do not take an active part, but which has an effect on them through the mesosystem or microsystem. For parents, This might include the school board or extended work hours. And for children, this can include family benefits from the parent's work, or such as extended health care. These aren't things you have a direct impact on. They are things that become a part of your work, but you can't influence them directly. The macro system is what consists of a society's ideological or culture. This is where shared beliefs are the basis of policy decisions. Policies based on an assumption concerning the pattern and relationship between the sexes, which, while such policies tend to be adjusted according to economic or political situations, this change tends to occur very slowly. And then the chronos system, this is a rather unique sort of level. Here we're talking about the dimensions of time as it relates to social environment. So this could mean the time between 100 years ago to today to 100 years in the future. That's chronological, that's time, and how things will change just based on time alone. The internal version of that time could just be over your lifetime. You're going to go through changes by virtue of you getting older. You're going to have a family, you're going to be a parent, you're going to be a grandparent, you're going to be retired. These are stages of life, these are time-related dimensions that will affect your social environment. And then lastly, but not leastly, is developmentalists. They look at the entire life cycle of a family from its formation to its end. They break down a family into specific stages based on the child and the adult development. They state that a family will change in predictable ways. Of course, if you have children, predictably, hopefully, they leave your family. And that's a stage that's predictable. They state that a family will change in predictable ways. I just stated that each stage and task is related to a social time clock. Now, a social time clock is the social expectation. It's culture to culture shift. I mean, not every culture believes that a woman should have a child at the same time. In fact, it used to be that the pressure from family members that a woman should have a baby soon because, well, you're married and you're getting on to that, that age, that's a social time clock. And it changes from culture to culture. When a certain life events are supposed to occur, you're dating, you're working, marriage, babies, these are all part of the social time clock. Developmental theorists have been described as providing an idealized model that real families don't really fit. Now, we have families who start in their 40s, late 40s, and having children in their 40s. That's not the same as the family that starts children in their 20s. Rely on the concept of nuclear family, that families will stay together and do so for long periods of time. And the current research is now responding to changing family forms. That is to say, they're starting to look at family forms of single parents, blended families, adopted families. They're starting to become a part of their theory. So not any one of these theories are absolutely right, but all of them have an impact on how we view families and their role in society. I hope you have found this informative, and I hope it's popped some questions into your mind about, well, what do you think? How do these theories impact how you think about family and its relationship to society? Thank you, and good luck in this semester, and we'll look forward to seeing you in week 2. Bye now.